Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This is our family forum meeting, the Washtenaw Families Against Narcotics chapter. We're based, obviously, in Washtenaw County. We usually have our meetings pre-COVID at the 242 Community Church in Ann Arbor, but we've been Zooming it since, I don't know, March of last year. And when we do eventually get the green light to go back to face-to-face meetings, which I'm really looking forward to, we're going to continue Zooming. We're going to continue streaming live on Facebook as this meeting that's what's happening right now. So again, thank you everyone for joining us. This meeting is very much needed right now. The subject we're covering and discussing, I don't hear it discussed that often until, as I've heard from people who participate in inpatient or outpatient therapy, that they hear about this toward the end of their therapy when they're being discharged. And that is relationships and how to navigate those relationships when you're in early recovery. So the title of our presentation today and our discussion is The Heart of the Matter, Navigating Intimate Relationships During Early Recovery. And I wanted to let everyone know the way this came to us is how many of our good ideas percolate up to us, and it's through people like you who are participating on this in this meeting. So this meeting came to us, this idea, through a fan board member, and that fan board member is Jermaine Atkins. And he came to me and said that, you know, we ought to talk about relationships when you're in recovery, because a lot of times when my guys, and Jermaine takes care of exclusively men. So he said, though, that when something happens, either there's a relapse or whatever, negative outcome, a lot of times it's due to a relationship issue, speed bump. So we ought to talk about that because there aren't a lot of people talking about it. And that was the catalyst that spurred us to set this up. So with that, we've got an amazing panel. We've got six people who are going to share their story. One of the six is also a subject matter expert. That would be Steve Feldman. And the seventh person is also a subject matter expert. That's Dr. Chantel Thomas, who is on our panel. And with that, I wanted to turn it over to Steve and Dr. Thomas to kind of give us a baseline of what we hope to accomplish today, and to just set the stage for the incredible stories you're going to hear over the next hour or so. So with that, Steve.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Mario. And it is a pleasure to be here, and certainly a very interesting topic and relevant topic. And, you know, early recovery, all recovery, but especially early recovery, requires a focused commitment. And when we're here at the fan meeting and in recovery circles, it's really being looked at through the lens of recovery first. You know, relationships, especially new relationships, but any relationship early in recovery can challenge the commitment. So we're really going to have this discussion and bring things up around not whether or not it's a good idea to be in relationship or start a new relationship, but more from an idea of what is the thing that can help support optimal recovery early in the game. And early, you know, when substances are put down and that addictive part of the brain is still very active, but not using its main substance, it's looking for some way to satiate what it's looking for. And relationships are a place that extreme emotional highs and lows can be experienced. And emotional highs and lows are very important to manage, as it's risky to recovery for either an extreme high or an extreme low. So there's really no magical formula or amount of time before entering a new relationship, or um, what it takes to be in a healthy relationship. But there's some really important elements that are present that are going to really be explained in detail tonight. And some of those really important elements, I think the first one is that commitment to recovery being the most important thing. Not as a selfish weapon, like using it like my recovery is first, but a real commitment to the things that are necessary to help us heal early in recovery. The second thing is honesty. We'll hear a lot about that tonight. And I think the third really essential element is, you know, getting help when it comes to making big decisions and when it comes to managing really emotional things, not doing it on our own. So whether that's seeking professional guidance and counsel or leaning on your recovery community and the recovery support. So the idea of this meeting really is to offer perspective, inspiration, tools, and shared experience in hopes that at least one person takes away something that's super valuable. And Dr. Thomas, if you could, you know, really stand on that a little bit and comment, and your mute button is on still. So there you go.
Yeah. I have to be stealthy with my mute button because I have a 3 and a 6-year-old who are ninjas and they'll sneak in at any moment. Yeah, I mean, I think this topic is incredibly important. As a clinical director of a substance abuse treatment facility, I can't underscore enough what a critical element relationships become in terms of they can bolster one's recovery in really lovely ways, and they can also be a tremendous destabilization for recovery in many ways. And one of the things that I've come to appreciate also for a lot of folks that we've treated is they discover that there's this really big vacuum that shows up in their life as soon as they stop using substances. And when that vacuum appears, there's this really strong instinct to fill it with anything that feels like connection. And that is a super tricky and difficult place to be when you are in the process of dating or trying to kind of fill that void. I'm sure we're going to hear from the folks tonight. I know we have some really beautiful shares forthcoming of people who can speak transparently about their challenges with that and where they've been successful with that. And I can't underscore enough how much trickier it is to navigate relationships healthfully and successfully than it is with substances, because at least you have abstinence as a barometer, whereas you don't have the same guidance that you can necessarily lean on if you're ready in an intimate relationship. And also, even if you've been sober for a period of time and you start reemerging into dating relationships, there's just a lot of layers of complexity there. To Steve's point, I think most people can agree that we sometimes are at our best in relationships, but we're also at our worst in terms of what it brings out emotionally and the way in which it can be triggering for destabilizing things. So I'm very honored to be here tonight and look forward to the shares that we're going to have from our panelists.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Thomas, and thank you, Steve. Okay, so before we roll into our first, introducing our first panelist, I wanted everyone to know at the end of this session, we're going to open it up to Q&A. So we're going to hold off. You can certainly send questions in the chat feature that the panelists can answer, through the chat feature. They can read the question, then they'll respond to it live. Or if you wanted to go face to face with anybody on the panel, let us know in the chat feature, and Brandon, who is our Zoom administrator, will let you in so you can actually dialogue back and forth with whoever you want. So you've got two options for making a comment or asking a question. Through the chat feature, face to face, we are going to wait till the end for that. That's number one. Number two, the best feedback we get on our meetings comes from all of you. And to that end, at the end of this meeting, we're going to send a link to a questionnaire that won't take you more than 5 minutes to fill out, probably 2 minutes, to be perfectly honest with you. But I cannot believe the quality of the feedback we get from the people who attend these meetings. It has led to different subjects to cover, ideas from across the country on exciting things that are happening in the world of recovery that we go pursue. Just a lot of good stuff. So please take the time at the end of the meeting, when you see the link, to fill out the questionnaire. That would be most gratefully appreciated. So with that, Mr. Jermaine Atkins, you're first up. And why don't you talk about why this subject is important to you, and share your story.
All right. Well, my name is Jermaine Atkins, and I hope that everyone can hear me because I just got a new external microphone today, so hopefully it's working well. But I am a person in long-term recovery. My sobriety date is December 3rd, 2015. I'm the owner of a sober living company right here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, called Anyone Sober Living. And over the last 5 years plus, while in this recovery process, I've noticed that there are a lot of suggestions that are given very often, and they're directed toward the newcomer. And some of those suggestions are things like give time to let the girls heal. You know, I'm never really, I don't know if the women share that same suggestion, you know, the men, but I hear that one fairly often. Another one that I hear is to wait a year before getting into a relationship. And something else that I hear fairly often is men stick with the men and women stick with the women. Now, most people that I've come in contact with, including myself during the recovery process, didn't follow these suggestions. And with that comes some stigma from within the recovery community. And that stigma leads to people, you know, just continue on with behavior that is associated with addiction, such as keeping secrets and being dishonest. And if anyone is with the recovery process, one thing that is also said fairly often is that keep the secrets will keep you sick. Now, after a few years in the recovery process, I have gotten a better understanding on what a lot of these suggestions mean and why people say that. But that understanding did come through a lot of hard lessons. So, one suggestion that I did follow is, and I picked up on it in early recovery, was to check my motivations before getting into an intimate relationship. So I did things that were suggested of me, like I made a list of characteristics or qualities that I would like to find in a significant other, and qualities and characteristics that I would like to be myself. I tried to operate from a place of love went in an intimate relationship as best I could. But most importantly, what I did was I had a really solid group of men that I can speak to and be honest with about all the things that were going on in my life, you know? And due to having this solid group of men in my life that I can speak to not only remove myself from that intimate relationship. Let me see my video. I was not only able to I was able to remove myself from that relationship when my partner at the time, introduced substances into our relationship. And that right there itself was extremely difficult. And it was because it just doesn't seem right to abandon your significant other when they're struggling. And also, I think that people in early recovery, especially myself, like I had not experienced the emotions such as love with a clear mind in a really long time. So I experienced that emotion very intensely. There we go. Got the camera back on. I don't know if someone
Well, you know what, Jermaine,
or not.
you've got.
If you did, please feel free to turn it back off. So I experienced those emotions like really intensely, and I guess. Can you hear? I'm listening, Mario.
Yeah, you're breaking up. You've got a low bandwidth, so it's probably better if you shut your video off and just speak. Is that correct, Brandon?
Were you saying something, Mario?
Brandon?
Yes. Yeah, that is, you should
got it
now.
Okay. Sorry, everyone.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better when you're.
All right, cool. I'll leave it off.
We're not going to be able to see your pretty face, but we can hear your amazing story.
You're doing everyone a favor.
Okay.
So, but anyway, back to the benefits of having this group of men in my life. When I was in that intimate relationship in early recovery, when my partner at the time introduced substances into our relationship, I was able to remove myself from the situation, even though it was extremely difficult. And it was difficult because, emotions, they were new to me. And experiencing these emotions with a clear mind was, for the first time in a long time, they were very intense. But because I had this group of guys, I was able to put my recovery first, and I was able to stay clean no matter what. Now, also, something else that was beneficial to me, like because of this relationship I had with this group of guys, I was also able to approach my recovery from a holistic viewpoint. So even though my relationship wasn't going the way that I wanted it to, I was able to focus on continued education, raising my children, improving my relationship with God, repairing my damaged finances, starting and growing a business. But more importantly, I think I was able to focus on helping others and staying clean no matter what. So I guess like me stressing having a group of people in my life that I could be honest with is, I can't stress that enough. But I didn't just have a group of friends in my life that I could just talk to like randomly and just tell all the bad stuff I did. And they say, sure, Jermaine, thanks for being honest. I had a group of guys that would help guide me through my life and help me achieve my goals. And they will also like actively, like try to hold me accountable for making progress toward the goals that I wanted to accomplish. And I think that like, although my relationship from early recovery, like it didn't end in marriage, which was like my goal at that time, I kind of found that even after we had broke up, the problems that we were experiencing during that relationship, I was still experiencing. And I think that was like the saddest part about me having a relationship in early recovery. And what I mean by that is that after the relationship was gone, the problems were still there. Therefore, the logical conclusion was that I was probably 99.9% of the time, the problem myself. And I remember thinking a couple of things pretty distinctly when I had that realization. And one of them is that the person I was in a relationship with and myself, we weren't very different. The only problem is that they introduced substances into the relationship and I had not picked up any substances yet, you know? But something else I remember thinking is that I wish I had spent all that time when I was trying to monitor another person in recovery. I wish I had spent that time working on myself. And my friend Vince, he kind of pointed out to me, he was making a joke. He said, hey, Jermaine, that chapter in the AA book, it's working with others, not working on others. You're supposed to be working on yourself. And all that time when I was in that relationship, I was really just working on someone else. And when it was all over, I was still the same me that I was when we first started, you know? So as I move forward in my recovery process, I try to share my story with that experience with the guys that come into my life through my sober living company. And one of the reasons why I do this is so that those suggestions that I was given and that most newcomers are given are understood more clearly and and more quickly. So at Any Lane Sober Living, one of the things that I try to do is to ensure that the stigma of being in an intimate relationship in early recovery does not exist at our housing company. And what that does, it makes it possible for me and all of the guys to talk about these things, talk about what's really going on without not feeling the need to hide or be secretive. And obviously, like I'm still not that great at relationships now. But because I have a group of guys that help me and I try to help other guys that are in recovery as well, I still have a place where we can all grow together, you know? And I think that through these times, the things that I've learned the most is that it's not just the girls that need time to heal. I think we all need time to heal. And something else that I think that I've learned is that before I start an intimate relationship, I should definitely start a relationship with myself, with platonic friends, and start a relationship with God. And definitely have a group of friends that I can talk to and depend on. And with those things right there, I can stay clean no matter what, whether I'm in an intimate relationship or not. And I know a lot of people probably came to this panel today hoping to hear how to have a successful relationship in early recovery. But my thought is that if you come out of a relationship in early recovery without picking up drugs or alcohol, it was successful. And that's pretty much the only thing I know as far as how to achieve that is by having a group of guys in my life and being honest. And that's pretty much all I have. Sorry about the technical
That's okay.
flaws.
When you turned off the video, the ability to hear you went up a lot. So regardless, thanks, Jermaine. Okay, Counselor Shan. I know you've got an interesting story, and I also wanted to thank you for all you do in the community. I know there's a lot that you do for people, so thank you for that. And with that, share your story.
I'm David Shannon. I'm an alcoholic, and I've been sober since November 10th of 2008. That was not my first rodeo. Through my drinking career, I had 5 drunk driving convictions. So I was sent to AA many, many times by judges who had many, many reasons why it was a good idea for me to be sober. And none of them made any difference. When Jermaine asked me to do this, I thought he had me for the wrong panel, because I have many ex-wives around the country that would like to testify on this panel that me and intimacy are not words that are said in the same sentence. But I do have 2 ex-wives. I I had 2 sets of children with 2 ex-wives. I lost full legal and physical custody of both those children to my ex-wives because I could not stop drinking. The last custody hearing I went to in 2006, 2 years before I got sober. The only issue before the court was my drinking, and I showed up the morning of the hearing and I was drunk and representing myself. So I was not very good at this for a long time. One of the axioms, as Jermaine said, one of the axioms in early recovery is do not get involved in a serious relationship in your first year of recovery. I do not know whether that works or not because I've never met anybody yet who has not gotten in a relationship in their first year of recovery. So apparently that is still to be discovered if it actually works. I do know with the guys that I sponsor, and I've always sponsored a lot of guys, that is the one thing that comes up on a consistent basis, is the relationship stuff. And I always encourage them to talk to me about it, but I really don't want to listen. So I wish I had an aha button on my desk and they call up and I said, I've met somebody, really special. And I could go, I think she's the one. She's my soulmate. Well, I don't know about that. You met her in detox, but go ahead. This is the one I've been waiting for all my life. Okay. And this is, because, just what you talked about, there's a hole there, what Dr. Thomas talked about. If you can't feel good about yourself, having a good looking person on your arm makes you feel better about yourself because at least they find you attractive. Even if there's nothing about yourself that you can see that's redeemable, you have a good looking person that's beside you who thinks that you're pretty special. And if that's the only self-worth that you can generate in early recovery, it is worth everything to generate that self-worth. And there's a lot of self-hatred that contributes to alcoholism and drug addiction. I've told this story many times. When I did my 5th step with my sponsor, a 4th step is a thorough and fearless moral inventory. And a 5th step is admitting to God, to yourself, and to another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. And I sat down and I did a 5th step with my sponsor, and I thought I did a pretty good job. And he said, is there anything you haven't told me? Is there anything that you're going to take to the grave with you that nobody is ever going to know? And I said, nope, I've told you everything. And a few months later, I was sponsoring the first guy I ever sponsored. And I was listening to his 4th step. And we were out in I have a van and we drive out in the country in the van when I listened to a 5th step, and he was having a horrible time getting it out. And he was sobbing and basically I said, you just got to spit it out. Either it's got to come out or you're never going to tell anybody. And what had happened is he had been sexually abused by his father growing up. And he in turn had sexually abused his younger sister. And when she was 17 years old, he found her downstairs in their basement and she had hung herself from the I-beam in their house. And he had lived with this for 25 years. When we were going through this, I told him, and I was the first person I'd ever told, that I'd been sexually abused when I was a kid. And I'd never told anybody. I never said a word to anybody. I really didn't mean to say it to him either, because I was just trying to make him feel better, make him feel okay, and that this had happened to me too. And he was not responsible for the stuff that happened to him when he was a kid. And that was the first person I had ever told. And when we finished his 5th step, he's still sober, by the way. He's a CPA in Chicago, Illinois now. I got home and I called my sponsor and I said, remember that thing you asked me? Is there anything that I haven't told you? Is there anything that's going to the grave with me? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, there is. I was sexually abused when I was a kid and I've never told anybody. And he said, okay, is there anything else? And I said, no, that's it. And he said, well, you got to tell your wife. And I said, you don't understand. I'm an ex-NHL hockey player. NHL hockey players did not tell their wives that they were sexually abused when they were a kid. And he said, it's just a suggestion. He said, but if you don't tell her, you will drink again. And so I went home and I told my wife. And I have heard my wife's Al-Anon open talk. And in her Al-Anon open talk, she talks about when I heard somebody else's fifth step and I came home and told her something that I never told anybody else. And that was the day that our marriage started. So I didn't know that there was such a barrier there between her and I. I thought we had a good marriage. And I thought that I was open and honest, and I thought we had an intimate marriage. But until everything was on the table, until all the secrets were out, and I didn't have any more secrets, I wasn't hiding anything else, then it was never going to be a true relationship. And we're married. I've been sober for 12 years and married for 13. So you can figure out the math. It didn't take my wife very long to figure out that she had married a drunk, and she started to go to this right-wing Nazi organization called Al-Anon. And the next thing you know, my life got like really bad in a hurry. And often when I do open talks, I tell people my name is David and I'm an alcoholic. And I've been sober since November 30th, 2008. And my wife saved my life. So the fact that my wife was ready to leave me before I went to detox, she was ready for our relationship to end. She was ready to lose me, but she was not going to live with an alcoholic anymore. And I didn't want to lose her. And I went to treatment not to get sober. I went to treatment because I didn't want to lose her. And as a result, I didn't lose her. I got sober and I have a wonderful life these days. But most of us, most alcoholics and addicts have secrets that they've been hiding for years, things that have happened to them when they were drunk or when they were high or when they're passed out or when they're in a blackout that they cannot forget and they cannot let go and they cannot forgive themselves. And until you forgive yourself, you can't have an intimate relationship with anybody else. And until you are open and honest with somebody else, I really don't think recovery is possible. I know that Steve's on here and Dr. Thomas, and they got a lot more experience than I do in this particular area. But that has been my experience dealing with alcoholics and addicts over the years and sponsoring a lot of them. And unless you get it all out on the table, there's no chance that you're going to stay sober. You will drink or drug again. So unfortunately, that is the reality of the situation. But Mario, thank you for the work that you do for this organization and the support the community has given to people in recovery here. It is a huge part of the community these days. And people are awakening to the fact it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden the new Washtenaw County prosecutor is changing the way people approach alcoholism and drug addiction like never before. And that's the result of people getting involved and deciding the old way was not working. We have to do something different. And this organization is a big part of that. So that is all I got.
Well, thank you, David. In fact, that new prosecutor is on our advisory board. Ellie, you probably know him? Yep. So yeah, he's a good guy. So look, thank you for that, Dave. Steve Feldman, in addition to being a subject matter expert, you also have a story to share about your relationship and what happened. So go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mario, and Dave and Jermaine. Thank you for sharing what you're sharing. And you know, a big part of being in this work has been motivated by my own personal story. I am somebody in recovery. I am sober from drugs and alcohol since April 17th, 1992. And I learned how to put down substances, and I learned how to stay sober. But this recovery journey is so much more than that. And part of what my story includes is that, you know, Dave, I wish I would have listened to you long ago, because I had my own twist to how recovery went. And that twist was something like, you know, I have stuff in my rearview mirror, secrets in my past that if I don't do those things again, it's really nobody's business. And I made a deal with myself that as long as I didn't do that again, I didn't have to tell anybody. And then when those things that were in the rearview mirror that I was never going to do again after I got sober started to show up again, and those were behaviors not using drugs or alcohol, but those were decisions that were made mostly around betraying my family, betraying my wife. And, you know, I feel like carrying secrets around are like having landmines inside. It's almost impossible to avoid them. And certain things happen and those triggers get hit. And really what happened for me is the more of those landmines that were created, there was this cycle that really happened. And the cycle is that I had a lot of shame about my behavior and my history. And I was also too afraid to really tell anybody, no matter, I went to hundreds, maybe thousands of meetings, and I heard people talk about it's the honesty, you're as sick as your secrets. I always felt that it was a little bit, I was separate from that. And the truth is as I went along, I hurt a lot of people. I picked up year after year of token of sobriety, of not actually using drugs or alcohol, which on its own was a miracle. I didn't know how that ever was going to happen, and that happened. But on its own, it was not enough because I was hurting people in my life. I was hurting myself, and I devastated my family. And you know, when I when I look back and have an opportunity to see really what happened, is that my relationship with myself and the shame that existed, maybe the traumas of my own upbringing that were not really dealt with because I had no ability at the time to really be honest. All of those things created an environment for me that I always reached out to do something to relieve that discomfort. I didn't know that I was doing that, but all of those types of decisions for sure continued to harm my family, continued to be decisions that put me further away from being in a real close, intimate relationship. And ultimately, it blew up. I lost my family. I got divorced. I have three beautiful daughters that really didn't want me in their life, and they said not forever, but for sure for now, because the pain was too great. And what I have recognized and what is possible in true recovery is that when all those secrets got revealed, what happened for me is the cat was out of the bag. And I started to really honestly share my story and share my truth. And in sharing those truths, as horrific as I felt it was, there was relief that was created. And in that relief came from actually telling the truth. And as I started to build off of a foundation that wasn't hiding, those landmines that I talked about before weren't there. And they were replaced with a new kind of peace and serenity that gave me courage to be more open in relationship, to be more truthful. And, you know, all I cared about was healing the damage that I created. And I'm here to say that little by little, one step at a time, not through words, but through consistent actions, you know, those relationships with my family have been healed. Those relationships with my kids have really improved in ways that are just absolutely incredible. In fact, in some ways, the foundation of truth in those relationships have have us closer than I ever could have imagined. And the unimaginable is that, you know, I hurt my wife in not knowing how to be in an intimate relationship because I really wasn't ready. You know, they talk about it being a year. I needed a lot of work to be the kind of man that was in a relationship that was real, that was true, that was intimate. And, you know, all these years later, many years later, I've been divorced for over 10 years. My former wife and I are back together. We've been working for the last 4+ years on healing the past and on building a new life together. And I am so blessed to be able to, you know, participate in my life in this way. And it is truly out of healing, out of truth telling, and out of really being willing to have strong enough support with therapy and with recovery groups and with friends to be able to sustain the discomfort that it takes to deal with the truth without trying to mask it by some type of behavior or some type of, you know, relationship that's put together just to make things feel better. So I am, you know, I'm honored to be able to share to this group a story that I didn't think was ever possible. I know that if it wasn't for recovery, if it wasn't for living a life of being able to stay true to commitments rather than to what I woke up to and what I wanted to do because it felt good or felt right, has made a difference. And the hopes in sharing this and being part of this organization is to be able to give another person, even if it's just one person, some kind of bit of information or hope that's helpful along their journey. So, you know, thank you very much for allowing me to share. And it is certainly vulnerable looking at a number here that says there's 60 people in this group, having no idea who 51 of them are because I can look at a screen of 9 of what I'm looking at, and to talk about something that, you know, still to this day is very close to my heart and very open. So thank you for letting me share, and I'm honored to be here. Thanks, Mario.
Thanks, Steve. Tara, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then share your story?
Hi, my name is Tara. I'm an alcoholic and an addict. My sobriety date is July 25th of 2015. I got sober young. I was 22 years old. And today I actually work at a treatment center named Growth Works, helping other people get sober. So I have a lot of experience with relationships myself and with like helping people in early recovery navigate relationships and women I sponsor. I'm one of the unique few that waited over a year to get into a relationship per my sponsor. And I listened to her, and I don't really know why, but something in me listened to her. I was desperate to like I was desperate to keep my sobriety when I got out of treatment. So I was pretty willing to listen to suggestions. And I'm so grateful that I did. Abstaining from relationships for over a year really allowed me to work on myself and like gain self-esteem and self-love, and just like who I would want to date at 90 days sober was not who I would date at a year sober, 2 years sober. Even now I have 5.5 years sober. That's ever evolving as I grow. So when I like first came in the program, like after my first 4th step, my sponsor had me write an ideals list, which was like you write the ideals for your ideal relationship. And like at about 6 months sober, mine was like, he skateboards and he likes the Grateful Dead, and just like super like superficial stuff that like really doesn't describe how someone is as a person. And I did a new one this summer, and I had values like respect, and like I like through gaining self-esteem, I learned to value how men treat me over just like if they're cool or like So like I'm really grateful that I did like I waited a little bit over a year, and I have dated men in recovery, and I've been able to like walk away when I feel like it wasn't right. If like I didn't like something, like how he treated me or whatever, like I've learned to be happy alone. Like I'm happy single. So I'm like, if you're adding more stress to my life than joy, like I'm out kind of thing. So I'm grateful for that. And like I had a lot of fear too, like in my addiction before I got sober. I had a boyfriend, and he was my world. He was my everything. And like when that ended, like I was broken and devastated. And I'm grateful for him today, because I feel like he helped expedite the end of my addiction. But like I was fearful my first year to be as consumed with somebody as I was with him, because I knew that like if I made him my higher power and him my everything, like if that ended, like I would likely relapse. And I've seen a lot of women do that, like get into relationships and they become their everything. And when that ends, they have nothing left. So like I was very wary of that. And like in my first year of sobriety, like I spent a lot of my energy like making friends and like doing stuff with friends. Like we go like camping or we go bowling or just like doing fun stuff. And like I gained a lot of friendships that year. And also like when it came to dating, I had friends to bounce stuff off of, and like having other perspective on like, oh, like this happened. I had friends in my corner. And when those relationships ended, I had friends and I had a community and I had a network of people. Whereas if I invested all my energy in one person, I wouldn't have that community around me that I like spent a lot of time building. And aside from like gaining respect and like caring about how I'm treated, also like I think Steve touched on it, like my first year sober, it's like, what did I even have to offer him? Like if I don't love myself, how am I going to love somebody else? And like working the 12 steps, like you kind of like step 5 and 4 and 5, you like kind of look at your character defects, and step 6 and 7 are like actively working to do the opposite. So like when I came in, like I was selfish, self-centered, dishonest. I suck at communication. I'm avoidant. So like if I'm not working on those things, like how am I going to navigate a relationship? And that's been like a 5-year-long journey so far, like learning how to negate those defects. A big one for me is like communication. Like it's very uncomfortable for me to communicate, and I have grown a lot. I'm not perfect, but like within my first year of sobriety, I absolutely could not do that. So it's like, how could I have a healthy relationship if I haven't worked on my own defects? So I think that's a point a lot of people miss. And I've sponsored a lot of women that get in a relationship, and when it goes bad, like I've had them go back out. So yeah, I am one of the few, like I don't think like nobody should get in a relationship, but like I'm so grateful I didn't, because like I was like supporting a lot of people, a lot of women from rehab, which kept me sober. I made good friends, I made connections, and I was really invested in myself and my program. And had there been a dude that I was like hanging out with every night, like that wouldn't have happened. So I feel like that was big for me. And also like I got sober young, like 22, and all of my boyfriends in my addiction were the basis of our relationship was using. Like they drank like I did, they did the drugs I did. So like I didn't even know how to be like in a relationship that didn't have like drugs involved. So like, and I kind of realized like I made this what's the word? I had this revelation. So I was dating, like when I was dating men in recovery, and like I had this revelation, and I was like, if I'm like not telling my dad everything about our relationship, then what the hell am I doing in it? Because I would find myself, my dad would be like, oh, how's it going with so-and-so? And I would be like, oh, it's good. But like in my head, I was like, well, he didn't call me back last night or whatever it was. So it's like, if I'm not being 100% transparent, like in my relationships, like with my loved ones, and like, what am I doing in this relationship? Because like I dated a lot of like men that treated me bad in my addiction, and like waiting a year enabled me to like have that self-love where like I don't date people who like treat me poorly. So yeah, I guess that's about it. Letting myself gain that like self-respect and like learn to like trust on my higher power and my sponsor and the woman in my life to like, because they're always going to be there for me. Like at the end of the day, like my girlfriends are going to be there for me no matter what. So I'm grateful I set aside that time to like focus on myself and like my life and like stuff that brought me joy. And like I feel like I'm better for it today, and I'll have more to offer someone in the future because of that.
Tara,
And that's it.
that was awesome. Everybody's story is awesome. So far, so good. I'll tell you what, I'm going to have a t-shirt printed up that I'm going to wear. And on the front, it's going to say, if you're adding more stress to my life than joy, ... And on the back, in big letter, I'm out. Triple exclamation point. If you're adding more stress to my life than joy, I'm out. And here to that one, okay? So thank you very much for sharing your story, Tara. That was awesome. And thank you for all you do in the community over there at GrowthWorks, okay? Deandre, you're up, sir.
Hi, my name is Deandre Reilly. I'm a person in long-term recovery. The last time I used was August 17, 2015. And I love, yes, son, sorry. One job, son, go. Okay. The program that I attend, they also talk about not getting into a relationship for your first year. One of the pieces of literature actually discusses how it's one of the most talked about things and one of the least like adhered by, kind of like hidden like rules things. But I had someone else that I heard say, they said, forget the year thing. They said that you shouldn't get into a relationship until you've worked a solid fourth and fifth step. Because they said, because if you don't really truly know who you are, how can you go ahead and add another person into that relationship? That was really, really good advice that I chose not to listen to at all. I should have listened to a lot more. Well, I really can't say that because I am where I am because I did what I did. I got clean in a small area, and I got to learn what it was like to go into a meeting that normally average maybe 6-7 people, and this is way before COVID. And I had dated one of them. And then at one point I had dated 2 of them. And that awkward part at the end of the meeting when we all close up, and I was kind of really like tearing myself away from the fellowship by getting in these different relationships. But it did help a lot. Some of the relationships that I formed with some of the men in the fellowship, because I can go ahead and I could bounce things off of them, and I could let them know when I was thinking crazy thoughts, and they weren't people that would go ahead and just tell me what I wanted to hear. They were all people that told me what I needed to hear. So I kept coming back to meetings. And then I got into a relationship, and I believe Dave had said something about, like she was the one, and my soulmate, and this time was going to be different. And I ended up having a child with this woman. And when my son was 2 days old, I went with my brand new car seat, went to go pick him up, and CPS was there because she had had other children that during active addiction she had taken. So she was flagged as soon as she had her child. They alerted CPS. And they didn't know who I was. They penciled my name in on the paperwork and took my child from my arms. And that night I went to a meeting and I shared about it because that's what the people in the fellowship I attend told me to do. And I continued to do that. And I got him back within 10 days, which was pretty unheard of. But that relationship with someone that was constantly in and out of the program, it strained so much of it took so much of my energy. And at a certain point in time, I realized I was focusing more on her recovery than I was focusing on mine. And without even picking up any substances, my life had become just as unmanageable as it was when I was actively using substances. So we go through CPS, I get full custody of them. And I have this group of people who have helped and who've all kind of like come around and helped out the single dad. I'm a real big advocate to having open meetings where children are welcome. I do know several single fathers, but I believe that it's being a single parent is something that I believe society looks as exclusive to women. And that isn't how it is in my life. I have right now my 3-year-old that you all just saw run on in here, my 13-year-old son, and my 15-year-old daughter. They were supposed to be keeping him corralled in the room, but toddlers kind of do what they want to do. But right now, most of my energy is just, into just trying to be a good parent. And for me, I learned that relationships in the rooms, not particularly for me, because if something doesn't work out, I don't like having to go to that meeting and still see that person. I don't like trying to maybe avoid a meeting so that that person isn't uncomfortable with seeing me. Because one of the things my sponsors always said is just stay clean and keep going to meetings. And if someone has a problem with your preference, let them talk to their sponsor. But it was still weigh on my heart because my son's biological mother, who hasn't been involved in his life, she kind of stopped coming to meetings because of the breakup. Well, at least that was one of the excuses she used. I don't hold anyone's sobriety in my hands, so it's not my fault. But I still do feel my side of the responsibility and working steps in the program, especially going through step 8 and 9 and realizing the pain and stuff that I caused by getting in that relationship because I knew better and you all told me better and I didn't. I just definitely feel that for me, relationships in the rooms, I've seen them cause more problems than good. And there was a question that I saw in the thing, I believe it was Rick M. says, before anyone did their 4th step, did they really know if they were in good, honest love relationship, or was it actually acting on lust feelings? And I know for me personally, I can't speak for all the panelists. I know that it was lust, but I would go ahead and I would try to put like a different name. Or I would say we're not in a relationship, we're just having fun or whatever. I would go ahead and find some way to sugarcoat it and make it okay to justify it. But then I had people in my life that would let me know it doesn't matter what you call it. Like it is what it is. If you just take everything, add it up, that's what it is. And so now just going to meetings, sponsoring people when they're willing, and attempting to not lose my mind with all of these kids. Thank you all so much for letting me share.
So thank you, Deandre. I got a quick question for you before we move over to Dr. Thomas. But so your baby, was that the catalyst to, I gotta do some things differently? Is that what I heard? Your children?
Yes. My children, the older children that I didn't have a relationship with, um, it was that Father's Day, realizing I'm never going to get that card or that pair of socks. That ended up being kind of, I don't want to say my rock bottom. That was when I realized I was at bottom. Like the rest of the world had seen it, and I realized it. Um, but definitely my youngest son, because I was clean when I had him. Um, that was what let me know that relationships in the rooms just were not for me. It it affects more than just me when I have a relationship with another person in recovery, especially in the smaller recovery communities I've lived in.
And Jermaine, you know DeAndre, yes?
Definitely, I do. And I think that stories like DeAndre's, where there he is, that's my godson right there, Carter. But I think the stories like DeAndre's, where a man can become a single father due to a relationship in early recovery, where both partners are not stable in their recovery process, are important to talk about. They're important to talk about because these things happen more often in the world of recovery than they do in the outside world. However, as long as there's a stigma associated with relationships in early recovery, people will go into hiding when they do it. And the solution that DeAndre has found for being a single father, other people may not find it. So it's just another one of those examples of why it's so important to have people that we can talk to, and just removing the stigma associated with relationships and early recovery in general.
So look, I want to, as is always the case during these meetings, my phone blows up with, you're not centered in the screen, you're going up here, you're doing, but I just wanted to read you a couple of text messages. These guys are amazing. These people are so strong. To be able to pour themselves out here like this is something that always amazes me. How can you not admire them? And I concur with that. I wanted to turn it over before we go to Q&A. I wanted to turn it over to Dr. Thomas. And just so you guys know, Dr. Chantel Thomas heads up an amazing inpatient rehab facility in Wisconsin by the name of the Manor. And you guys should Google it. It's off the charts. We have some incredible places here too in our community. But the reason Chantel comes up, at least in my mind, is someone who's good on these panels is because she's got this background that is research-based and clinically based. And then she's the kind of person that you can sit down with at Zingerman's and have a pastrami sandwich. Right, Dr. Thomas? She's relatable. And so with that, Dr. Thomas, you've heard these incredible stories. I'm seeing a lot of common threads here. And why don't you put a capper on it before we go to Q&A?
Yeah, thank you. I'm honored to be part of this panel and by far feel that that my contribution is small comparatively speaking, but I'm honored to be here nonetheless. I'm so moved by kind of the instincts, the self-awareness, and the capacity of all of these people to be able to talk about the critical piece that hasn't been named as such, but how shame plays a role in relapse for people. And why I'm naming that specifically, I think we've used the word stigma But what stigma really just covers is shame for people, right? And so when the rooms aren't actually safe, and when your support network isn't safe because you feel shameful because you've acted in a way that you don't think is acceptable to people around you, you completely lose your window for support. And it's, when I hear that, I mean, I love this work because I find it so moving and so heartbreaking how many people are suffering to begin with. And then once they get around a certain level of support, they continue to suffer if there's not enough safety to talk about what's really going on. And it's almost worse for people when they're surrounded by folks that are supposed to be safe people, but they still can't talk about it because people have strong opinions or they have judgments about what's happening. So this piece, I mean, Jermaine said in his sober living that there's a rule that that's not forbidden, so that it increases a sense of safety so there can be dialogue, I think is amazing. And what Tara spoke to as well around this concept of recognizing that she was always kind of pruning out the details of what was happening in her relationships with her father. Those are what I come to appreciate as well, is so many people instinctually know what is the right path, but because they haven't kind of done the internal calculus around it, the best sign that they know they're in trouble is what they're hiding. And so what I would just continue to come back to is, if all else fails, when you find yourself massaging the details, leaving out pieces of information because you feel shameful, that is a great cue that there is something happening in a dynamic that's very dangerous for you, because shame is really closely connected to relapse, in my personal opinion, and the work that I do with people. In addition to that, most of the folks that I've worked with in recovery have not had great modeling of good intimate relationships. And quite frankly, where else do you get your metrics for intimacy, for connection, for partnership, except for through your family of origin? And you can have wonderful parents, but more often than not, the people that I work with have not had great modeling of what that relationship is supposed to look like. And more importantly, when you're struggling with your own kind of perceived deficits, it makes it very hard to bring yourself as a whole person to another individual. So I would continue to say that, again, I'm just moved by the transparency, the authenticity, the vulnerability of the people speaking, but this piece about hiding is such a critical part of it. And if you feel like your network of support isn't safe to talk to, it's a great idea to find someone who is, and it can be just really powerful to bring it into the light, essentially. Thank you for letting me be part of this.
Thanks, Dr. Thomas. You know, this has been amazing. I've got, I shared my email address. Someone wanted, how do you get proof that you attended, participated in this meeting? If you reach out to me, my email address is in the chat feature. I'll get you whatever you need. I think Bruce asked that question. There's my email right there. You know, I guess one of the things that I always try, that I've heard from people in recovery, and I learn the most from people in recovery, by the way, it isn't from experts with PhDs at the end of their name, is that, and I'm hearing this as a thread throughout these stories, that hang out with people who have your best interest at heart, you know? And David Shand said, at the end of the day, his wife didn't want to be a part of his life if he continued to drink. But I suspect that, not suspect, I know she's glad that she stuck with him. She had David Shand's best interest at heart. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is that when you get a chance, this other common thread, there's so many common threads here, but this one of self-esteem. And I've noticed that with people in recovery who we communicate with regarding scholarships and bus passes and clothing, tennis shoes and things that they need. It's like I always try to make it a point to let them know when I'm done that your community cares about you. And we do at Washtenaw Fan. And it isn't meant to be gratuitous. We do care at Washtenaw Fan. And one of the things you can do, I think, is, again, not in a way that's, you're doing it because you think it's the right thing to do. But when someone in recovery knocks it out of the park, let them know. And that's like a given in a normal relationship with your children, with your spouse, with your friends. Don't just send them an email or a text. And I've said this before, pick up the phone, schedule time, look at them and say, Tara, I appreciate you. I'm so thankful you took the time to be on our panel, as I am with all of you. And you guys are incredible people and you deserve to be recognized. And I'm so proud of everyone here on this panel for having shared their stories. And if any of you at this point want to interface with anyone on the panel, Brandon will let you in. Brandon, if you could send the link to the questionnaire for everyone. And the next meeting we're doing, we're focusing on veterans and that population of folks and what we can all do to help them. We've got some guest speakers from the VA who will be joining us. The meeting after that, we've got in April, we've got a guy by the name of, you want to Google this, everybody, Captain Lyle Prowse, Prouse, Northwest Airlines, the first pilot to have ever been arrested stepping off an airplane while flying a commercial jet. He's our guest speaker in April. His story is one of the few that is published in the big book. He's our guest speaker in April. So the answer to your question is, Rick, not only do we change it up, but we try to get topics that are the most relevant and timely. And we know that right now, this social isolation is detrimental to people in recovery. It's detrimental to everyone, okay? I know people, friends of mine, who are going crazy over not being able to go out, over not being able to meet others over a cup of coffee, over not being able to exercise. But for people in recovery, this is very harmful. So we're trying to pick subjects. We had subjects last year that were, how do you get through this if you're in recovery? So that's one of the questions, Rick, and to everyone here that we have in our questionnaire. Are there topics that that you think we should be covering that we can go pursue? So anyway, and thank you. I would have loved to share about this topic if I knew about this before. Hey, we do our best through Facebook, and we've got incredible volunteers in AA who run around and put our flyers on corkboard. Were it not for my bum knee from an old hockey injury, I'd be out putting up flyers at Zingerman's and gas station corkboards and doing whatever I can, because the more people who get engaged in participating in our meetings, the better we're all going to be. So, John Garrett, man, you're bumming me out, not being able to come in. There's
I
nothing.
think he's just not there right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Does Angela, we're going to kind of be wrapping up here, but I did want to say this. I mentioned, yes, this talk is recorded. You're right, Rick. Our next meeting, we're focusing on vets, and we're also focusing on the hometown hero for the state of Michigan recipient, that would be board member Jermaine Atkins. So we're going to lead with that with someone from the state to talk about that award, followed by a small panel discussion involving veterans and what we can all do to help them, availing them of resources in the community. And I did want to briefly thank Angela Galka from the University of Michigan Addiction Treatment Clinic, who helped Jermaine and I pull this together. She's incredible, and she knows what she's doing. So thank you, Angela. It's just wonderful to work with you. This is the first time I've heard about your meeting. I usually attend the Canton, so I've heard about that. Okay, well, that means I got to do a better job in marketing, Rick, to get through to people like you. And anything you can do to help us, my email address was in the chat feature. Rick, reach out to me. Will everyone who is a part of this meeting participating gets added to our database, and you will start receiving our email blast. So you can, you'll be, there it is again. But anytime anyone wants to reach out to me, by all means do it. You guys, another idea that came to us through all of you was we had a meeting on stigma in December. We had a subject matter expert from Ohio State who shared a PowerPoint presentation with us. And one of the ideas that came to us as a result of that meeting was, hey, why don't you have a panel discussion of people in recovery sharing their story with people who get engaged with people in recovery on what that stigma did to them. So we're going to have I don't know when it's going to be. It's going to be later this year because we're booked out through, I think it's through June, but we're going to have a panel discussion of people in recovery, and we're going to invite law enforcement, judicial folks, judges, probation officers. We're going to invite healthcare professionals, right? Psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, nurses, LPNs, physical therapists, occupational therapists, people who get engaged with people in recovery so that they can hear right from someone in recovery, when you talk like this, it makes me feel this way, or just treat me like the disease I have, like you would someone with diabetes or congestive heart failure or whatever. But I just wanted to share with you guys, that's another topic coming your way. Way cool what you are all doing. That's a great way to end this meeting. And Angela Galka stepping up there with our Facebook page. Anything you guys can do to support us, our programs. We have free yoga for recovery, free exercise for recovery, a bus pass program, right? Because one of the gaps in the system is transportation when you're in early recovery. Scholarship program. So go to our website, learn more, and I appreciate all of you participating. Hope to see you guys at our next meeting in March, where we're going to be talking about veterans and honoring all they do to help us. You guys take care, okay? We'll see you.